On the killing fields of southern Sudan, boys as young as 12 are fighting a war. They are the boy soldiers of the SPLA, children marching into Africa's longest and most brutal civil war. The soldiers have little to eat and even less to wear. Many have never been to school and cannot read or write and don't even know how old they are. But they have guns and are ready to kill. Some of their guns are captured from the enemy. Others are given to them by friendly governments in neighbouring states. But the rebels are also armed by black market arms dealers around the world. As the civil strife continues and hundreds of thousands of people are starving to death, South African arms merchants seem to have found a lucrative market for their military hardware. Rumours have persisted for years that South African weapons dealers sell arms to the SPLA. Rebel leaders deny this, saying that they capture all their arms from the Muslim enemy in the north.
Like last year, we captured more than 3,000 rifles, G3 rifles. And these are the rifles we succeeded to arm some of our forces. We captured more than 16 tanks, T-55. And these are the weapons we have.
The SPLA has an estimated 25,000 soldiers under arms, and it is simply impossible that they could have captured all their weapons.
The weapons in the Sudan comes mainly from two sources. Black market arms dealers, and then the weapons legally purchased by the Sudanese government.
Dr. Yaki Potgieter, a former Defence Force officer, has investigated illegal arms deals in Central Africa for several years.
I know that there's some South African arms dealers that's currently selling weapons to the SPLA specifically in Sudan.
Several South African arms dealers have armed the SPLA. At least 2 Johannesburg arms dealers have had extensive deals with the SPLA. Earlier this month, a Belgian national was deported from Johannesburg for allegedly selling arms to, amongst others, the SPLA. Another weapons dealer was murdered in 1994 while trying to find weapons for the rebel movement.
The free market weapons dealer, black market weapons dealer, is definitely not driven by morals, he's driven by profit. And the weapons goes to the highest bidder.
Weapons in the Sudan are not only used for waging war, but also to kill civilians, to loot, to rape. There are an estimated 1.5 to 2 million illegal guns in the area. Everybody in southern Sudan, it seems, has an AK-47. Sudan is the biggest country in Africa, stretching from desert in the north to lush forest in the south. It is a potentially rich land with a diversity of people. But for several years now, television viewers around the world have come to associate Sudan with images of hunger and starvation. At this very moment, hundreds of thousands of people are starving to death or are in urgent need of humanitarian aid. But Sudan is also home to Africa's so-called forgotten war. Since 1983, more than 1 million people have been killed in southern Sudan.
Well, I've been a fighter all my life. Even my children have joined me. Definitely, I would love to see peace in my lifetime. But if it doesn't come, I will continue, and my children will continue the war.
Civil war broke out with independence in 1956, when predominantly black and Christian Southerners rebelled against their Arab and Muslim countrymen in the north.
Well, it is a very simple question. When rule is put on you that you must become an Arab, you must become a Muslim, you must become a third-class citizen in your own country, I think that cannot, you cannot accept that. Logically, that's what I resent.
And this is what the Southerners are up against, one of Africa's biggest armies. The Sudanese People's Defence Force has an estimated 150,000 men under arms, and is said to be supported by Islamic fundamentalist regimes like the one in Iran. Our journey to find out more about the war in southern Sudan started in the Kenyan capital of Nairobi. This is where we met up with Mac Yuang, a 22-year-old Sudanese refugee who lives in Kenya. Mac is a former boy soldier of the SPLA.
I joined the SPLA army when I was 12 years old. I'm not quite definite of how many people I've killed, but when I was in the army, I have my rifle, and whenever we are going for combat or when we are attacked, I just open my fire, shooting.
Mac fought with the SPLA rebels from 1987 until 1993.
I try my best to cope with that life, but it is a hard life. When the Arab attack our garrison, my friend Kuala, I lost him, and it's my age.
Mac hasn't seen his parents or family for 11 years. We decided to take the young man with us to Sudan, not only to try and reunite him with his family, but as our guide and interpreter. Our journey to the Sudanese border took us through some of the most remote and untouched parts of northern Kenya. For the past 9 years, Operation Lifeline Sudan and other aid agencies have been flying food and medical supplies from Lakachakio into southern Sudan. South African pilots from the air company SAF Air do many of the relief flights. From the air, it was difficult to imagine that there could be famine in southern Sudan. The land looked fertile and green. But for several years now, ordinary people have been unable to cultivate the land because of the war. These people are now starving to death. The famine in Sudan is mainly in one province, Bahr el-Ghazal, and it has been caused quite deliberately by one man, Cherubino Ball. He was the SPLA commander for Bahr el-Ghazal, but defected to the Sudanese government in 1994 and became a general in the People's Defense Force in Khartoum. Cherubino Ball was sent back to the area where he set up a third force of Arab militiamen on horseback. They devastated the region and killed thousands of people, stole their cattle, and destroyed their lands. Cherubino got the nickname of the Butcher of Bahr el-Ghazal.
They kill indiscriminately women, children, old people, burn their villages, burn their food, took their cattle in large quantities, and leaving the population terribly destitute.
But in an amazing turnabout in January this year, Cherubino deserted from the Sudanese army and returned to the SPLA.
Oh, I feel very much delighted. It is welcome. It is better to be together with the devil rather than the devil being alone at large. He has been doing a lot of damage to us when he was with the Sudan government.
Since his return to the rebel movement, Cherubino has been an elusive figure and is in hiding. We traced him to a suburb outside of Nairobi, where he is guarded by SPLA soldiers.
But now we are not together now. I don't think that there is something that nobody is blaming me that why do you kill people? They know exactly that even in ourselves, in our tradition, you fight with your brother and tomorrow morning and you can come together.
I think his place was quite empty. I think many people missed him. That he has come back now to the SPLA again, I think everybody is very happy.
I was fighting our own brothers because we have arms, we are soldiers, and it is finished now. Why should they? And I told you before that they are not blaming me now. Is there anybody who told you exactly that these people are blaming me? Nobody.
We were eventually taken to the Bahr el-Ghazal province in southern Sudan in a United Nations aircraft that was transporting food to the area. A day later, we joined up with soldiers and commanders of the SPLA who agreed to take us to the front line a few kilometers northeast of the strategic town of Wau. For kilometer after kilometer, the land was empty, and burnt-out villages bore witness to the havoc and destruction caused by Commander Cherubino and his Arab militiamen. The front line turned out to be nothing more than a SPLA base in a deserted village. There was an enemy garrison 8 kilometers away, but except for the odd exchange of mortar fire and skirmishes between foot patrols, the front line was relatively quiet. The soldiers were amazed to see us with Mac.
They even goes further to ask me, now that they have come here and they have seen us, some of us are walking naked, do you think they are going to bring clothes for us and maybe boot and all other artilleries to fight the Arabs? I just tell them that I don't know. They just want the world to know what is going on here.
The front line is riddled with landmines. This SPLA soldier stepped on an anti-personnel landmine. The remains of his foot was removed without anesthetic in a makeshift hospital. The SPLA has been condemned by international human rights organizations like Amnesty International for the killing and torture of civilians and for forcing young boys into its army against their will.
Well, you call them boys, but we call them, these are our men, really. They are men struggling. The state of clothes and all these things definitely is bad. We would want it to be better. But given the situation, that the resources that we have at our hand, it is better we fight whether we are naked or not and liberate the land rather than wait for the uniforms and all this and fight the war. No, we would just continue.
His name is Ngor. He says it's Ngor.
And how old is he?
Narun Kade. He says only the mother who knows. I don't know how old I am. I was born in a village.
And ask him whether he's been in any fighting.
Yeah, he says yes. He says he have been in a fight with the Arab militias.
And were any people killed?
Yeah, he said some people were killed.
And ask him whether he was scared.
He
shouldn't have been carrying a rifle. He should have been carrying a stick. He should have been carrying a spear. But now things are changing. The spear is becoming obsolete. So the rifles are getting up. And once he gets the rifle, then he feels even happy. He gets more motivated. That is why we get our armies really motivated, because they are youth and they want to participate in the war.
During our stay, rebel soldiers were marching off towards Wau, a town occupied by the Sudanese army. A ceasefire has recently been declared in Bahr el-Ghazal, but like so many before, this one too might not hold.
In fact, I may not tell you how we can plan to take Wau, but as I can tell you that Wau, we can capture it at any time.
Our forces actually have surrounded the whole town of Wau, almost 4 kilometers away from the town.
For sure, there are going to be casualties to the civilians there inside, but we will try to minimize the casualties.
Yeah, when the orders come to strike, you see, on the move, we are ready to take Wau anytime.
We returned from southern Sudan without being able to help Mac Anyang to find his home area or see his parents and family again. We however heard that his younger brother is now living in a refugee camp in northern Kenya. Many members of his Dinka tribe have now fled to Kenya and are living in this refugee camp. He first met one of the headmen of his tribe.
This is a letter from my dad,
From?
my father.
Is this a message?
Just, I received it just today.
Just now.
Message from your father?
Yeah.
We finally found his brother in another part of the camp.
I'm very happy to see my brother. That's been a long time. Now it is marvelous. I really like it. And it's gorgeous. I see my brother.
Mac's father said in his letter that the family is in good health, but that food and clothes are very scarce. Khartoum, once the last outpost of British colonialism, is today a sprawling city of about 9 million people. Since the current military government seized power in a coup d'etat in 1989, Sudan has been turned into a model Islamic state, and Sharia law has been imposed as the supreme law of the land. Khartoum is a hostile and unfriendly city where outsiders are viewed with much suspicion. Our passports were confiscated upon our arrival, and every move we made was monitored. The Sudanese government has been accused by human rights organizations of sponsoring acts of terrorism, of doing little to end the civil war, and of slavery, abduction, torture, and executions.
ألم تر إلى الذين أوتوا نصيبا من الكتاب تؤتي الملك من تشاء.
It has been branded as a terrorist state by the United States and has been condemned by much of the international community. Sudan is today not only at war with the SPLA, but is in conflict with most of its neighbors. It is facing a rebel onslaught not only from the south, but also from the east. The Sudanese government has declared a jihad or holy war against its enemies.
Others are trying to eliminate us. This is what we feel. That's why it is a holy war. That's why it is jihad.
The People's Defense Force is an ever-growing and expanding army. The Sudanese government has said that by the year 2000, they want 900,000 men under arms. A university was recently closed and the students sent to the front line.
We feel that this aggression will continue, and we have been targeted by some of the superpowers. So we have to be ready. So we are trying to train every individual, man or woman, to be ready to defend the country. That is our policy, and we are going according to that.
Soldiers swear their allegiance to the Quran. When Ugandan soldiers invaded southern Sudan last year and helped the SPLA to take a strategic town, young Sudanese soldiers strapped themselves with explosives and stood in the way of the enemy tanks.
If you have a cause, you will definitely be ready to die for it. And this is what we are doing. And actually, we are calling for shahada and seeking shahada.
What does that mean?
That means you have to die for your cause, and you will definitely succeed in this, and God will support you.
The war in the south has also had a devastating effect on Khartoum. More than 1 million southerners are now living in desperate circumstances in refugee camps in and around the capital. One of the southerners in Khartoum is a former SPLA leader by the name of Riek Machar. He defected to the Sudanese government in 1997 and is now an assistant to the president. We asked him what life was like in the capital.
Normal. And by the way, I'm not the only Southerner in Khartoum. The war has brought nearly 3 million to the north, particularly in Khartoum state. Many of them are here. They're living normally.
Most Southerners would not agree with Mashar. They are unemployed and say they are discriminated against. Although religious freedom is guaranteed in the Sudanese constitution, Islam is the state religion.
And even though in the church, you have to go and pray. After praying, back home. Don't talk about problem. Remain your tongue with you. If you enter into the policy, you're speaking some things badly, should be caught.
Both the SPLA and the People's Defense Force have recently claimed victories in the war. The Sudanese forces still hold 3 of the biggest towns in southern Sudan, but the rebels have made advances in the east. There is, however, no victor in this war. Weapons dealers justify their supply of weapons to the SPLA by saying that they are supporting Christians who are suppressed by a fundamentalist regime who want to impose Islam on them.
The only people that are suffering from this provision of weapons and war material is the people on the ground. And they suffer to such an extent that the Christian moral issue is not justifiable.
It is safer, it seems, to be a soldier in southern Sudan than a civilian. 3 out of every 4 people who die in the war are civilians.
Once the weapons are supplied to the rebel group, what the rebel group does with the weapons is basically its concern. That's why you find boys of 9, 10, 12 that are carrying weapons and that have seen a fight or 2 in their lives already.
Several South African arms dealers have recently and in the past provided arms to the Sudanese rebels in southern Sudan.
It's difficult to say how many of them are involved in that because a lot of these arms dealers are supplying weapons, for instance, to somebody in Uganda or to somebody in Kenya or wherever, and they then find their way back to the Sudan.
Weapons are usually bought in Eastern Europe, from where they are transported to a neighboring state and driven or flown into southern Sudan.
Weapons are not sold for cash, especially when it comes to rebel groups like that. They do have cash support from international organizations, but what they can sell of is mineral concessions, hardwood concessions.
Southern Sudan is a vast area with an abundance of natural resources. It has oil, gold, and teak forests. The forests in the south, it seems, are especially attractive to weapons dealers. Dirk Stoffberg is a former weapons dealer, apartheid assassin, and a self-confessed arms supplier to Iraq, Iran, and Libya. Stoffberg and his 7th wife were murdered in July 1994. According to documents we had found, he was at the time looking for an arsenal of weapons for the SPLA in return for a teak forest in southern Sudan. Stoffberg sent so-called shopping lists for tanks, missiles and mortars around the world.
The provision of teak concessions is a big issue in the Sudan. And you can buy your way and your protection by supplying weapons for those concessions.
Ivan Whitehead and Luchi Fikuseku are registered Johannesburg weapons dealers with a long history and complicity with the Sudan People's Liberation Army. They were appointed as so-called technical advisors to the SPLA in 1993 and have arranged for the supply of weapons to the movement. They are unofficial ambassadors for the SPLA in South Africa. They also have several other clients in Africa, diamond mines in the neighboring Central African Republic, and business interests in Ethiopia. They refuse to participate in this program. Earlier this month, a Belgian national by the name of Giza Mazozi was deported from South Africa to Belgium, where he has been charged for weapons smuggling. He has supplied weapons to, amongst others, the SPLA. South African companies often transport the arms from Eastern Europe to Sudan.
Once an arms trader is brokering a deal of arms between, say for instance, Bulgaria and Central African state, and the weapons are not crossing South African soil, there's very little that the South African authorities can do to stop that, as the legislation currently are.
The supply of weapons to the Sudan comes at a time when South Africa is trying to broker peace in the area.
We want peace between the Sudanese government and the Sudanese People's Liberation Army. And that peace will come if we come to an arrangement which is with the satisfaction of the government of the Sudan as well as the Sudanese People's Liberation Army.
As long as guns continue to flow into southern Sudan, there can be no peace and the local population will continue to suffer. More than 2 million people face starvation this year because of the effects of war. If the conflict continues, aid organizations say, more people may die next year.
We are really backward because no roads, no hospitals, no schools, but only starvation and fighting. It is pathetic. So it is really hurting, but there's nothing we can do. That's our land and that's when we were born in.
People like Makun Young face a bleak future. He started carrying a gun when he was only 12. He fled to Kenya at the end of 1993, entered school and passed matric. But he has no money and cannot continue his studies or find a job in Kenya. He doesn't even know whether he will ever see his parents again.
I always pray, God just protect my parents and maybe let them just survive with those kind of life and don't let them pass away without seeing them again.